Every day, I share another story from the Golden Age and the moments that shaped an unforgettable era. If you'd like to keep these memories alive with me, hit subscribe. It costs you nothing, but it means a lot. Thank you for being here. Now let's begin. Lee Van Cleef had a reputation for carrying deep grudges, and some people even whispered that he truly hated him more than anyone. Born on January 9, 1925, in Somerville, New Jersey, he grew into a legendary actor whose career stretched across more than 50 years. He became one of the most recognizable faces in Western cinema, especially for his sharp-edged villain roles that changed the entire vibe of the genre. Van Cleef's rugged style, carved-out features, and those intense eyes made him look like someone who could size you up in one glance and decide your fate right there. He was built for cold, calculating characters, but his life story was way deeper than just playing the villain. His journey was packed with discipline, reinvention, and a non-stop grind that showed how seriously he took his craft. Growing up in small-town Somerville gave him structure, with parents who pushed strong work habits into him. His father, a watchmaker, drilled the importance of precision into his son, and that attention to detail followed Van Cleef through his entire career. During World War II, he served in the U.S. Navy as a radio operator and even saw combat, experiences that later gave his on-screen characters a sharp, hardened edge that felt way too real. After the war, he headed to the University of South Carolina to study engineering, but acting pulled him in like a magnet. Soon enough, he found himself in Hollywood hustling for roles. At first, he grabbed whatever he could. Small, uncredited parts, usually as soldiers, cowboys, or background tough guys, but even in tiny roles, his presence stood out. Eventually, director Sergio Leone took notice, and everything changed. Van Cleef's early Hollywood run wasn't glamorous, like in High Noon, 1952, where he played a quiet but deadly henchman who didn't even speak, but he still managed to steal the scene with just a look. His sharp, angular face pretty much locked him into villain roles, especially in westerns, where his appearance practically screamed trouble. Throughout the 50s and early 60s, he worked non-stop, stacking small roles and building his name as a dependable character actor. But even with all that effort, his career stalled. He kept getting boxed into the same one-note villain roles. On top of that, personal struggles and a serious car accident caused him even more setbacks, making it hard to break out of the typecasting. Then came the moment that flipped everything, his casting as the ruthless gunman Angel Eyes in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, 1966. Even though Clint Eastwood was the headline star, Van Cleef's icy, controlled performance as the skilled bounty hunter hit the audience like a shockwave. His chilling presence and layered acting turned Angel Eyes into one of cinema's most memorable villains. Van Cleef's look did half the talking. Those razor-sharp cheekbones, that angled jawline, and eyes that seemed to cut straight through people. He continued stacking major roles in westerns, including For a Few Dollars More, 1965, where he played the sharp-focused Colonel Douglas Mortimer, and The Big Gun Down, 1966, where he stepped into the role of a determined ex-lawman hunting down his target. His quiet intensity and action-first attitude made him a staple of the genre. But even as a villain, Van Cleef never played his characters flat. He always added weight and complexity, making every role feel like a person with rules, scars, and motives, even when they clashed with the law or society. In films like Death Rides a Horse, 1967, and Day of Anger, 1967, he played experienced aging gunfighters whose wisdom gave them a kind of tragic respectability, even though they operated outside the lines. His mix of danger and vulnerability made him magnetic on screen. Fans grew attached to him not just as a villain, but as a powerful presence who always brought something real. And while westerns turned him into a legend, his talent reached far beyond the dusty frontier stories that made him famous. By the 1970s and 1980s, Lee Van Cleef started switching things up, stepping into new styles of roles that showed people he wasn't locked into just one lane. His sharp voice and that commanding stare made him perfect for action movies like Escape from New York, 1981, where he played the intense and calculated Hawk, and The Octagon, 1980, where he teamed up with martial artist Chuck Norris in a way that surprised a whole new crowd of fans. These action films pushed him into a fresh era, introducing him to younger audiences and proving he could bring heat in more than just westerns. He also became a familiar face on television, showing up in several series during this time. One of his standout TV roles came in The Master, 1984, where he played a martial arts expert alongside Timothy Van Patten. His work on TV helped him reach people who might have never watched a single Western, giving his career even more range and showing how flexible he really was as an actor. Even though people mostly remember him for his powerful on-screen energy, Van Cleef's personal life was filled with real relationships, tough moments, and family dedication. His first marriage to Patsy Ruth Cale in 1943 came during a major turning point in his life, a time when he was a young man trying to balance his future dreams with real responsibilities. Together, Patsy and Lee raised 3 children, David, Alan, and Deborah, while dealing with the challenges that come with an actor constantly being away from home and juggling unpredictable work schedules. Their marriage eventually came to an end in 1958 after 15 years, a rough period for Van Cleef, as his career was hitting slowdowns around the same time. After the divorce, he stepped into a new chapter when he married Joan Marjorie Drain in 1960. Their relationship lined up with one of the most important chapters of his career, especially after he bounced back from a serious car accident that nearly stopped his acting altogether. As his luck began to turn, Sergio Leone cast him in For a Few Dollars More, 1965, which completely changed how Hollywood viewed him. Suddenly, he wasn't just the dependable background villain. He became a leading man with worldwide recognition. Joan witnessed this massive transformation up close, standing by him as he rose to a level of fame he had never experienced before. But fame brings its own pressure, and after 14 years together, their marriage ended in 1974. 2 years later, in 1976, Van Cleef married Barbara Vallone, a marriage that stayed solid until the end of his life. With Barbara, he finally found a sense of calm after years of personal and professional chaos. She remained by his side during his later years, especially as his health started slipping due to heart issues and complications from old injuries. Even as his roles grew smaller in the 1970s and 1980s, he kept working, showing that he wasn't the type to step away from the industry he loved. Barbara stayed strong through it all, and when Van Cleef passed away in 1989 from a heart attack, she survived him after 13 years of marriage. Witnessing his slow shift away from the spotlight, Van Cleef's personal life also included a memorable accident that left a permanent mark. Literally. While building a playhouse for his daughter Deborah, he lost the last joint of his right middle finger. This accident showed a whole different side of him. A tough, rugged screen icon who was also a hands-on father willing to build something just to make his kids smile. The missing joint didn't slow down his career at all. If anything, it added even more character to his on-screen image, giving him an unpolished, real-world edge that only made people like him more. Most viewers never even noticed the injury because Van Cleef was skilled at hiding it during scenes. But the people who worked with him up close knew it was part of his everyday presence, a quiet reminder of the sacrifices he made for the people he loved. The injury definitely needed serious medical care and recovery time, showing how far he went to be there for his family, even while living the unpredictable life of an actor. Van Cleef refused to let that injury slow him down, bouncing right back into Hollywood with the same grit he brought to every role he touched. His determination showed just how seriously he took his craft, and how committed he was to being a present father, no matter what life threw at him. But behind all that toughness, one thing stood out more than anything. Lee Van Cleef truly hated him more than anyone, and that him was none other than John Wayne. Their relationship wasn't just a simple clash of working styles or a mild rivalry. It was a heavy, deep-running tension that cut far past the surface. To people on the outside, it might have looked strange seeing 2 major Western icons disliking each other so intensely. But once you get into the details, the feud starts to make a lot more sense. Van Cleef brought an intense, sharp-edged presence to the screen, especially in spaghetti westerns. And he wasn't shy about the fact that he wasn't a fan of John Wayne. Wayne, the bigger-than-life symbol of American Western storytelling, always playing the noble hero, represented everything Van Cleef felt was fake or over-polished in Hollywood. Their mutual dislike became part of Hollywood legend, stretching across years and shaping how they moved through the industry. A major reason for the bad blood came from how wildly different their acting styles were. Van Cleef was a method actor. He dove deep into his characters, studying them, reshaping himself, and giving every role a gritty, grounded energy. He played complex men, characters with layers and shadows, and he took pride in hitting those depths. Wayne, meanwhile, often played the same classic type, the tough, silent cowboy with a steel stare and a straight moral compass. To many fans, that was charm, But to Van Cleef, it looked like Wayne wasn't pushing himself at all. In Van Cleef's eyes, Wayne was relying too much on his famous image instead of stretching his skills. He thought Wayne's approach felt safe, almost lazy, showing off a big persona instead of real versatility. Van Cleef viewed that style as arrogant, like Wayne believed he didn't have to evolve because the public already adored him. To Van Cleef, this was the side of Hollywood he couldn't stand, the polished surface with no appetite for depth. Their feud didn't stop at acting styles. Their political differences cracked the divide open even wider. John Wayne was famously conservative and extremely outspoken, constantly promoting right-wing ideas and defending the most traditional version of American values. He publicly supported the Vietnam War, spoke fiercely about patriotism, and treated any criticism of America as an attack. Van Cleef, while quieter about politics, leaned more toward progressive views and connected with the counterculture wave that questioned America's involvement overseas. He reportedly saw Wayne's political speeches as over-the-top and narrow-minded, the kind of attitude that ignored real-world complications. To Van Cleef, Wayne's public voice felt like a bigger version of the characters he played, the self-righteous cowboy who refused to see any angle except his own. This political divide added a personal sting to their already strained relationship, painting Wayne as someone Van Cleef simply couldn't respect. Another reason their tension grew came from how differently they experienced Hollywood fame. John Wayne hit superstar status early and stayed there for decades. People treated him like the face of American cinema, which gave him huge pull over projects, casting, and the industry as a whole. His fans adored him, and Hollywood practically bent around him. Van Cleef's path, meanwhile, was rougher and much less glamorous. His early years were stacked with supporting roles, usually as the villain, while leading men like Wayne soaked up the spotlight. Only when he starred in spaghetti westerns during the 1960s, especially Sergio Leone's For a Few Dollars More and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, did the industry finally recognize his talent on a big scale. Even then, his fame never reached Wayne's level. Van Cleef felt overshadowed for too long, and he blamed actors like Wayne, who dominated the scene, and left smaller opportunities for everyone else. That frustration dug itself into something personal, creating resentment he carried for years. But things got even more intense off camera, where personal experiences shaped the feud even further. Van Cleef reportedly saw Wayne as controlling and full of himself, the type who wanted everything his way, whether they were filming or just talking in a room. Wayne's huge personality didn't stop when the cameras cut. He carried that energy everywhere, and many people, not just Van Cleef, felt overwhelmed by it. Van Cleef was the quiet type behind the scenes, and he couldn't stand loud, show-off energy, especially when it came from someone like John Wayne, so he dodged any event where Wayne might show up. People who worked on set said the tension between them was impossible to miss, the kind of pressure you could feel just by walking past them. Wayne was said to brush off Van Cleef's skills, treating him like a basic character actor who was only good for playing tough villains, never a true leading man, and that attitude pushed Van Cleef's frustration to the edge. Van Cleef thought Wayne's success came more from timing and luck than talent, and it irritated him to no end when Wayne acted like he was the only star worth watching. Their rivalry grew stronger because both men wanted to hold the crown in the Western world during an era when the genre was at its peak. Wayne stood for the classic, old-school Hollywood westerns, clean heroes, clean villains, and a clear line between good and bad. Meanwhile, Van Cleef became the face of the darker, twisted, morally complicated worlds of the spaghetti westerns. Movies like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly showed gritty layers and hard choices, totally different from Wayne's more polished films like The Searchers or True Grit. Van Cleef genuinely believed his version of the West was closer to how real life looked, messy, conflicted, and full of gray areas. Wayne's films, in Van Cleef's mind, kept pushing this neat, perfect image of American honor and frontier justice, and that idea clashed with everything Van Cleef felt was honest about history. This wasn't just movie style, this was ideology. And that clash added fire to Van Cleef's frustration, making him feel like Wayne represented a world that refused to grow or face uncomfortable truths. Wayne's hero roles felt too simple to Van Cleef, too clean, too unwilling to show the messy reality behind the myth, and that only made his irritation stronger. In the end, the tension between Lee Van Cleef and John Wayne wasn't about just roles or fame. It ran deeper, fueled by completely different ways of seeing the world. Wayne stood for a polished, old-fashioned vision of America, the kind that erased the rough edges, and Van Cleef felt trapped in a Hollywood ruled by stars like Wayne who shaped everything around them. To Van Cleef, Wayne symbolized the kind of industry power that shut doors for actors who brought something more complex to the table. For Van Cleef, working in a system built around Wayne-like figures reminded him every day of the struggles he'd faced climbing out of the shadows. The bitterness stayed with him throughout his life, and the story of their feud turned into a piece of Hollywood legend. Two giants whose dislike for each other became just as famous as their films. Lee Van Cleef passed away on December 16, 1989, at the age of 64 from a heart attack, closing the chapter on one of the last true icons of the Western world. Even after his passing, his legacy kept growing, with fans and film experts continuing to study his work, especially inside the world of spaghetti westerns, where he broke the mold for how a villain could look and act. He reshaped the idea of the Western villain, turning characters that could have been flat or predictable into unforgettable performances packed with personality and depth. His films kept getting rewatched, reanalyzed, and celebrated because he brought a mix of danger, charisma, and complexity that still hits hard decades later. Whether he stepped into the boots of a cold bounty hunter, a slick outlaw, or a determined lawman, Van Cleef delivered performances that stayed burned into people's minds. His roles in classics like The Good, The Bad, and The Ugly, and For a Few Dollars More, remain some of the greatest Western portrayals ever put on screen. Lee Van Cleef's career proved how far reinvention, skill, and nonstop dedication could take someone, turning him into a timeless figure whose impact stays alive every time one of his characters rides across the screen. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, hit that like button if you felt something real, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories.